Welcome to Formula Timeline, the channel where we chronologically document every Formula One race in history, starting from the very beginning. Today, we're going back to May the 13th, 1950, the very first Formula One World Championship Grand Prix, held at Silverstone in England. Now, before we dive in, it's worth noting that since this race took place over 70 years ago, there's not a lot of footage or onboard radio like we get today. So most of what I'll be sharing comes from race reports, personal accounts, and archive documents. I've done my best to make it as accurate and vivid as possible, so buckle up and let's go back inside. After 6 long years of wartime rationing, blackouts, and bomb-scarred cities, Britain in 1950 was hungry for excitement. The streets of London still bore the scars of the Blitz, but just a few dozen miles away, at Silverstone, once a bustling RAF bomber station, another kind of engine had just begun to roar. As factories shifted from munitions back to automobiles, a new chapter in motorsport was being written. Historic races organized by the Royal Automobile Club in the late 1940s had laid the groundwork, but it wasn't until May the 13th, 1950 that the first official FIA-sanctioned World Championship Formula One race would take place here at Silverstone. Crowds of 100,000 flocked to the sun-soaked grass banks, eager to witness history. This wasn't just any Grand Prix. It was Formula One's inaugural World Championship event, combining pre-war Grand Prix tradition with a brand new global series. The buzz in the paddock was electric. Drivers, engineers, and spectators all sensed they were about to witness the birth of modern Grand Prix racing. Amid rationing and post-war rebuilding, this was Britain's chance to put itself back on the world map, behind the wheel and under the hood. What exactly made this formula so special? In racing terms, formula simply means a strict set of technical regulations. In 1950, the FIA's Formula One regulations were as follows. You could have a supercharged engine up to 1.5 litres, a naturally aspirated engine up to 4.5 litres. There was no weight restrictions that season. A fuel and tyre choice was completely open, even though most manufacturers chose treaded tyres. These rules were designed to strike a balance. Enough freedom for engineers to innovate, but enough constraints to keep competition tight. The supercharged 1.5 litre category, dominated by the legendary Alfa Romeo 158 Alfetta, meant blisteringly fast acceleration. On the flip side, the naturally aspirated 4.5 litre machines traded outright grunt for torque and reliability. In practice, though, the Alfa simply gobbled up the opposition. Everything from Italian red to British green lined up on the grid, but the 158's powertrain was the yardstick by which all would be measured at Silverstone. In 1950, national pride was painted onto every chassis. If you saw a scarlet Alfa Romeo 158, you knew Italy was on a mission. If you glimpsed the deep green ERA, you sensed the heart of British underdog spirit. And if a royal blue Talbot Lager flashed by, you knew it was hailed from France. Here's how the grid's palette broke down. Italy. The Alfa Romeo 158s, driven by Nino Farina, Luigi Fagioli, and Juan Manuel Fangio. The 158 supercharged inline-8 churned out 350 horsepower from just a 1.5 litre engine, making it the class of the field. The Maseratis were also a shade of Italian bread. For France, we had the Talbot Lago T26C, equipped with a 4.5 L inline-6. It prioritized stability and endurance. Pilots included Yves Giraud Cabintos and Eugene Martin. In Britain, they had the ERAs and the Altas, smaller teams with smaller budgets. The ERAs ran 1.5 litre supercharged engines, but they lacked the refinement of the Alphas. These were driven by Leslie Johnson, Bob Gerard, and Couth Harrison, amongst others. From Belgium, a yellow lone Talbot Lager private entry for Johnny Clays, adding continental flair to the grid. Despite a field brimming with 21 cars, it was Alfa Romeo's 158 that stole the limelight. Its lightweight, tubular frame, double wishbone suspension, and near-perfect weight distribution made it the machine to beat. Across the pit wall, rival teams had to pray for rain or mechanical gremlins to thwart the red machines. Long before it was the home of British motorsport, Silverstone was a sprawling RAF bomber station. flat wide and begging for wheels instead of tires. By 1950, the circuit layout stitched together 2 runways and perimeter roads into a 4.649-kilometer high-speed loop, or 2.8 miles. Here are the key corners and tidbits you need to know. Woodcut and Cox, 2 long right-handers at the start of the lap, with modest runoff in 1950. Missing your braking point here surely meant kissing a hay bale. Maggots and Beckett's. In 1950, these were simple kinked straights. Today's legendary S's were in their infancy. Still, the outward-inward sweeping bends tested a driver's nerves, especially in slippery conditions. Stowe, named after a nearby airstrip tower, it was fast, slightly banked right-hander. Hit Stowe wrong and you risked a high-speed trip into the stubble fields. Club, another hard right after a long straight. Late braking zones here were prime overtaking spots, albeit risky in heavy traffic. Front straight speeds topped out around 174 miles per hour for the Alphas, but heavy, drum-braked machinery meant braking for cops was more of a leap of faith than a science. Interestingly, the 1950 Silverstone layout featured almost zero elevation change, flat as a pancake. That meant slipstreaming on the straights was king. The paddock was a hodgepodge of wooden garages and makeshift tents, far from the slick hospitality suites of today. Yet this raw setup lent the venue a gritty, no-nonsense atmosphere. By Friday's practice sessions, it was already clear. Alfa Romeo would lock out the front row. Their secret? Relentless testing at Passo Cortina and Monza circuits back in Italy had given their drivers like Nino Farina, Luigi Fagioli, and Juan Manuel Fangio an edge in car control and setup. Here's how Saturday's afternoon qualifying shook out. Qualifying for the 1950 British Grand Prix was a total Alfa Romeo domination. Nino Farina grabbed the first pole in F1 history with a scorching 1 minute 50.8, followed closely by his teammates Luigi Fagioli and Juan Manuel Fangio. Reg Parnell, in his Alfa, rounded out a clean sweep of the top 4. Silverstone had just witnessed a statement. Alfa Romeo had arrived, and they weren't here to play. Farina's 1 minute 50.8 was a masterclass. He averaged nearly 148 kilometers per hour, not 2 miles per hour, around a bumpy 4.65 kilometer circuit in a car that by modern standards had no downforce. Behind him, Fagioli and Fangio were within half a second. Proof that if Alfa Romeo had one weakness, it was the occasional tiff between teammates over who would lead. Further down the order, Prince Biera's Maserati punched above his weight. He wrestled a 4C LT chassis to 5th. ERA's Peter Walker in 10th represented the best of the British privateers, extracting pace from a supercharged ERA B-type that was ancient even by 1950 standards. Sunday, May 13th, 1950, dawned sunny and mild, perfect for 100,000 fans to crowd the banks. The starting grid reflected the sheer might of Alfa Romeo. 4 158s locked out the top 4, followed by Maseratis and Talbot Lagos. When the green flag dropped, it was chaos. Here's how it went down. On lap 1, Farina kept his lead from Parnell, who started 4th, but Fagioli slotted in behind in 2nd. Fangio slashed into 3rd, while Prince Biera rocketed from P5 to P4 before Maggots. Already, the Alfa train was gapping the rest. Between laps 2 and 10, the front 3, Farina, Fagioli, and Fangio, swapped places almost at will, a choreographed dance to keep their cars in optimal temperatures. Meanwhile, Reg Parnell encountered gear linkage issues, dropping in behind Giroud Cabantos by mid-race. Between laps 15 and 30, the battle behind the Alphas heated up. Yoez, Gerard Cabantos Talbot ran 4th, holding off Louis Rosier's sister car by mere seconds. At club hairpin, Rosier dove down the inside twice but just couldn't stick the landing. Both Talbots lapped well, proving that the bigger engine cars could outrun some supercharged machines once reliability had factored in. On lap 22, Reg Parnell hilariously plowed through a straight hair at Beckett, one of Silverstone's unofficial mascots. The car shook violently, but Parnell remounted to eventually take P3. The hair, however, did not survive. Between laps 31 and 50, Fagioli chased Farina down relentlessly. Briefly, on lap 36, Fagioli grabbed P1 whilst entering Stowe. only to get boxed by lap traffic and forced to cede the position. On lap 49, after qualifying a magnificent fifth, Prince Bira grabbed to a halt. He had run out of fuel and his race was unfortunately over. On lap 60, the Talbot of Girard Cabantos, running a good P4, slowed with a slipping clutch. Rosier inherited P4 but was already nearly 2 laps down on the leaders. On lap 62, it was heartbreaking drama for Juan Manuel Fangio, who was running P3. He pitted with an oil pump failure. His retirement on lap 62 left the Alfa Trio spectacle incomplete, but underscored how fragile early F1 machines were. On the final laps, Farina, nursing a 3-second lead over Fagioli, managed brake fade on both front drums. But skilled heel and toe downshifts allowed him to keep momentum, crossing the line after 70 laps. Farina's total time was 2 hours, 13 minutes, 23.6 seconds, an average speed of 146.3 kilometers per hour, or 90.9 miles an hour. Here's how the final results looked. The podium finishers were Nino Farina, Luigi Fagioli, and Reg Parnell. Although to note, back in 1950, the podium celebrations weren't quite like what they are today. And these were the rest of the results. Notable retirements included Juan Manuel Fangio on lap 62 and Prince Bira on lap 48. Only 11 drivers finished the race out of a possible 21. After Silverstone's dust had settled, the points table looked like this. Farina's perfect haul of 8 points for the win and 1 point for fastest lap put him in early control. At this point, Alfa Romeo had not only swept the podium, but also set the tone for team supremacy. Back then, only the top 5 scored points, and you also got a bonus point for fastest lap. Notably, only a driver's best 4 results from the 7-race calendar counted towards their championship total, adding a layer of strategic consideration to the competition. And that wraps up the story of the very first Formula One World Championship race, a dominant display from Alfa Romeo, royal attendance, and the birth of something legendary. Next time on Formula Timeline, the championship heads to the streets of Monaco for the 1950 Monaco Grand Prix. Expect tight corners, narrow roads, and even this early on, a lot of chaos. We'll see how the Alphas handle the twisty layout and if anyone else can get close. If you enjoyed this look back at racing history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in Formula Timeline. See you next time in Monaco.